Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this episode of the On the Mark Financial Forum and Podcast. We have a very exciting and fun guest today, Steve the Hurricane Weiss from Home Care Evolution. Steve, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because you're just such an energetic guy and very fun to listen to. And I love seeing all your stuff on social, and engaging with you has been really great so far. So I'm excited to introduce you to our audience and have them learn from you and see what we come up with.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Okay. So why don't you, before we get started, maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your company. And the question I know everyone's going to ask is the hurricane. Where does that come from? What's behind that? There's got to be some story behind it.
So I love it. And again, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege. And it's interesting at this stage of my career. I've been in this space as a consultant now for 13 years. And in the last 13 years, I was the first person to have a YouTube channel and the first person to put social media videos and content out there. And now 13 years later, everyone refers to me as the OG. I'm the OG of the home care, marketing, sales, and operations experts out there. So
you don't look old enough to be an OG.
Thank you. That's what I tell people. I am 44, all glory to God, because it really is a blessing. And my company is Hurricane Marketing Enterprises is the actual company, but we've been DBA as Home Care Evolution now for the last 5 years, and we've just been operating and running and helping people who are in the home care space scale and grow their business, operations, sales, marketing, recruitment, retention, financial, all aspects, because I really love to have not just people help them grow their business, but make sure that they're a financially responsible and ultimately a better entrepreneur. So that's what I'm about. And then to your point about the Steve the Hurricane, that is a nickname that my old business partner, Brian, gave me way back in 2006. He owned the company. I was his business development guy. He gave me a raise, and he goes, I want you to be a hurricane out there in the industry. And that name stuck, and I just ran with it. So for almost 20 years now, Steve the Hurricane.
There you go. Well, it works, and it's great from a marketing perspective because people will remember it. So I don't know. I had all these visions of like you being a boxer, or you grew up in Miami or something. But hey, when somebody gives you a good nickname, you stick with it.
People ask me if I went to school at Miami Hurricanes University. They're like, did you graduate from the U? And I'm like, nah, it's not that.
Right. Or when you were born was in the middle of a hurricane. Like there had to be some story behind it, but that's all right. That's obviously not the only reason we're on together today. So you run a consulting business for home care owners and operators, correct?
Yes.
Great. And that's do you work with people that have smaller firms, larger firms, or is it kind of a range?
I say it's a range because I have different things that I can do for people if they're getting started to get them over the $1 million mark. My sweet spot are people in that 2 to 5 million range who are trying to get over the 5 million hump. And then I have a lot of clients recently who are like high level masters, people with $10 million businesses and beyond, and they're scaling to multiple locations and they have a region that they cover, or they want to become a statewide provider, or even, several states. I have programs for those individuals as well. So I kind of work with anybody at any phase of their business, depending on starting all the way through. I want to exit this thing and get my maximum return on investment.
Right. And it's great that you do that, because I think what I've experienced from home care companies is a lot of them are kind of mom and pop a little bit. And they're maybe really good at taking care of people, but maybe not great at running a business. And it seems like your consulting is very comprehensive. It's all different aspects. And I really appreciate that. And you also do conferences as well, right?
Yes, sir. And that's exactly it. Like that's where I find most people have the hardest times that transition from the mom and pop to a more corporate structure. And a lot of people they want to scale, but they don't want the corporate structure because they feel that they lose the personal touch. And I'm like, you don't have to lose the personal touch. You just need the systems and the processes that will allow you to scale and take on more patients. And then now, instead of taking care of 20 people, you're now taking care of 100, 150, 200 people and beyond. That's what we do. So I love it.
That's great. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of scaling, and even though we produce a good amount of loans, it's always reaching for the next goal and the next stage. And so I appreciate people like you that help people along the way. And I'm a big fan of coaching in general. I've done it for 15 years, meaning I hire a coach to help me with my business. And so I really appreciate people that are in your space, obviously in a slightly different industry to a degree, but the value of coaching is significant. People need to know that. So
Yeah,
kudos to you for what you do. So
thank you.
what is your background in home care? Like, I assume you were in the space before you started consulting. So what's your
So correct, and that's also where I was talking with the my nickname. Brian was the one who gave it to me. So I started out in 2005 as the director of business development for a very small company that was just under $1 million in revenue. They had not had their first $1 million year yet. They brought me on to help them scale and grow it. And from 2005 through 2009, I took this company from under $1 million to over $5 million in revenue. Back when our prices were only $23 an hour, and I say that because the national average is like almost $40 an hour today. So, we're talking about significantly less revenue per hour. To do 5 million was significantly more than it takes today to be able to do that. And then in 2009, the owner made me his partner. We flipped and sold that company for several $1 million in 2011. I stayed on for 12 months with the company that purchased us. This was a large corporation that bought us. They had 60, 70, 80 locations. And I started working with people on all the things that I was doing in my location. And then everyone else's numbers started to improve when they were doing what I was teaching them. And I said, you know what? This is great. I served my year. Now it's time for me to go on as a consultant. And for the last 13 years now, we've helped people grow their businesses by billions over what they would have without us. And I'm very proud of my clients and the things that they're doing. I see them on social media. They're executing the stuff that I'm talking about. And that's the reason why they're scaling the way that they're scaling. They're bringing in the right type of patients with great need, and they're able to keep these people home and out of the hospital. So they're growing revenue by taking better care of patients and keeping them home. That's a great way to be able to do your job and go to sleep at night.
and from my experience, and tell me your opinion as well, does it seem like most seniors prefer to age in place? Like they don't want to go into an assisted living facility unless there's some specific need to do so?
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with assisted living. There's nothing wrong with nursing homes. There's always a need for every level of care that exists. That's why they exist. But you talk to most people. I mean, think about yourself, Mark. Right? At some point in time, people don't just drop dead. Right?
Right.
Like very, very infrequently does somebody actually drop dead. What usually happens is someone gets some kind of a diagnosis, and then something happens over time, and then they decline to a point where now they're coming close to end of life and they need help. And most people want to get the care and stay in their home. They don't want to move. They don't want to relocate. Now, I think that if as an agency, and we're doing our care properly, we should be able to set the house up with pretty much everything that person needs so that they can remain there for the rest of their life, so that when they do eventually pass away, we all got to pass away. When that time comes, if it's me, I want to be in my bed. I don't want to be in a hospital. I don't want to be in a nursing home. If I can avoid it, I want to be in my own bed and pass away and transition to the next life. That's where most people want to be. So our agencies, we allow folks the dignity to be able to have that as they're passing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine going through that anywhere other than my own home, and like you don't want to have to do that in like a public setting if you don't have to, I guess, even though it's not public when you go somewhere else. But I can imagine that would definitely be desirable. And I know one of the biggest challenges typically is of home care in particular is cost, and like trying to figure out how many hours of care you need, and if you need full-time 24-hour care, that can get potentially very expensive. Can you talk about like some of the challenges that home care operators have in managing cost for the consumer, for the seniors?
Yeah, it is definitely a big challenge. Every person is different, and a lot of folks, I think that there's several factors in it. Like one factor I will say is a lot of people have their retirement, they have their savings, and they're looking at it as, well, I have to use this for the rest of my life. and there is a almost an unrealistic expectation as to just how much time someone has left when they're contacting for a lot of care. Like that's, and I hate to say it, but it is a truth. You know, if somebody had a massive stroke, they can't get out of bed, they're 90 years old, they don't have, we're not talking about decades, you know, we're talking about a year, maybe 2 years. So there's understanding that aspect of it. But then on the flip side of it, you know, the government only pays for so much. And a lot of people want the government to pay for more. But at the end of the day, the Medicare system, like in the United States, a lot of other countries are looking at what we, the United States, are doing with Medicare to provide for people because it's a good system. And it does work. Like 80%, 85% of people who have some kind of an episode get the care that they need. They go to the hospital, they go to rehab, they come home, a visiting nurse comes in, maybe a caregiver comes in for a couple of hours here and there for 60 days post hospitalization. And for 80-85% of the population, that is enough to get them back on their feet. But after that, that's where the government's like, listen, there's only so much money to go around. There's only so much that we can afford. This stuff that we're talking about that I'm mentioning here, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, in the hospital care and the rehab and everything else. And so there's only so much that we can pay for. So if you need beyond that, what's considered custodial care, getting dressed, taking a shower, getting the doctor's appointments, meal preparation, keep the house clean, interaction with someone else, either a family member has to do it or you have to pay out of pocket for it. And so there's this, I don't want to say the word burden because it's not the right word, but it is a challenge that the elderly and the adult children are facing in, you know, I'm an adult child. I have children, grandchildren myself. I'm still working full time. I cannot be there. But my mom can't be by herself anymore because if something happens, she's going to go through a lot of pain and suffering. And so now we got to find out a way to pay for this service. And, you know, you mentioned before it's expensive. I don't like to use the word expensive because it's not expensive. But a good product isn't cheap and a cheap product isn't good. So I don't want just any Tom, Dick, and Sally coming in to take care of my mom. I want someone who knows what she's doing and someone who's got experience to come take care of my mother because my mother has a lot of needs. Well, someone who knows what they're doing, someone who is experienced, is going to come at a higher price than I might be comfortable with, and that's where this balance comes from. Does the son and daughter have the resources? Does mom have the resources? Some do, some don't. And then there's the house, you know, and that's something that I talk about a lot, and, you know, we could talk about this in a minute, but a lot of people in this day and age, and you and I have spoken offline about this, but I love this term, and it is very true. The baby boom generation and the silent generation who are passing away now, right? The older folks, they own their house outright. They may not have a lot of retirement left, but that house that they bought for $60,000 40, 50, 60 years ago, that house now is worth $500,000, $750,000, $1 million, depending on what market they are in the United States. If that person can tap into that resource, you know, we call it cash poor, house rich, right? If they can somehow tap into that resource and get income to afford the services the government is not covering, they could live the rest of their life with all their needs addressed, have the highest quality of life that they can possibly have, and remain comfortable in their home so they can pass away with dignity. That's a win. That's a win in my view, you know?
Yeah, and you're right. The common thread that we see from baby boomers and the silent generation is exactly as you described. They're a buy and hold generation, right? They're not like the younger generation that moves more often. They move to different cities, they move around, you know, and are more transient. Their generation was very much like live in the same neighborhood, maybe in the same house for decades. And like you're right, the property values, I mean, even if you bought 20 years ago, have probably quadrupled. And in some of the markets that we're in, I mean, we just came across a case where a woman had bought her home for, you know, I think it was $50,000 and it was worth 4 million because it wasn't a great neighborhood when she first bought it. And now it's like, you know, blowing up 40 years later. That's what happens with real estate sometimes. And some people think, well, I need to pay for care, so I have to sell the home, so then I can't do home care, or I have to do it in a rental or something like that, which is not quite as easy to do, especially if you need to make modifications. But there's a whole tax component to doing that as well. If you sell the home, where you might be paying a huge amount in capital gains if you bought the home for next to nothing, and now it's worth, 10 times as much as you paid for it, 40 years later. There's huge tax implications of doing that versus keeping the home until you pass and then selling it right afterwards. I think there's that component to it too. But the most important thing is to be able to help people stay at home if that's what they are choosing to do. And you're absolutely right. People don't look at their home as an investment the way that they look at a retirement account like an IRA, where they just pull out some money every month to be able to pay their expenses. The problem is when you need extra care, those expenses are coming in faster and the money is draining faster. And we're now in a situation, we're in April of 2025 recording this, where the stock market just dropped 15% in 2 weeks, right? So people also don't want to liquidate. So how do you avoid that? There are financing solutions to be able to pull equity out of the home. Reverse mortgage is the most common one, but I'm not a huge fan of those. They have some definite downsides, especially if you at some point need to move into a facility, you can't keep them. There's some other things that make it less attractive. Interest rates, loss of equity on a compounding basis, where you're losing equity in the home on an accelerated basis over time. So there's some downsides to that. But people just don't look at their home as an investment the same way that they do with other types of accounts, but it can be leveraged. And like you said, it could pay for care indefinitely for the rest of your life. And it can be really impactful.
I agree 100%. I mean, you think about what you just said there. You said a mouthful, and it's really, really important. And every person's different. And, back in my day, there wasn't as many options as in my day when I had my agency. There wasn't as many options. Like reverse mortgage was like the only option. A lot of the HOC and stuff that you're talking about, other type of programs, they didn't exist then. But even from the reverse mortgage standpoint, I was always from the belief of, and I would always ask the family, and I would ask the son and daughters, other people, like, are you concerned about the inheritance? Are you concerned, like, do you need the house? Like, what are these things here? And if the person said no, it's more about getting mom the care that she needs, then I would say, then you can try this and you get it, and then it takes the pressure off. And then you can focus on getting the care for your loved one. And again, it is a personal preference. It is up to every person. But you're right. People they don't look at assets as tools to be able to get the care that they need. Another term that I've had people use before is that people hold on to certain things for a rainy day. Well, guess what? It's pouring rain on you right now. Right? The rainy is here, and we need that care. And to your point of selling the house and then all the capital gains and everything else. If someone sells the house and then if someone moves into an assisted living, they usually sell the house to be able to afford the move into the assisted living. Right. That ultimately is what people do. If I can avoid that and get the cash and then stay in my home for the rest of my life, and again, we're talking about 18 months, 2 years, maybe 3 years, that's a win. And why do I say it? My own mother. My mother had and she's a young lady. She's a young baby boomer. But just it's the hand that she was dealt. She had a massive stroke 10 years ago in 2015. And, she does qualify for Medicaid, but she's had a caregiver come into that house every single day since 2015. So for 10 years, there is zero chance that my mother would be in her home if it wasn't for the caregiver. She would be in a nursing home. And she does not want to be in a nursing home. She doesn't even qualify for assisted living. She'd be in a nursing home. And so when I look at the quality of life my mother has had over the last decade, and she's still with us today. I saw her Easter Sunday was a couple days ago, right? I saw her on Easter at her house, wheelchair bound, with a smile on her face, as independent as she can be, because she was able to get what she needed to get the care to be able to make that happen.
Right.
Shouldn't everybody be able to do that?
If they own a home, yeah, usually there's a creative way to do it. But it's not possible for every scenario. And there are some where reverse mortgage is the right or potentially only solution. But there are other alternatives that I think are generally better. But you made a great point. Most people usually sell the home to move into assisted living. The example I was giving earlier, this woman was 97. Who knows how many years she has left? Let's say it's a few. And we heard about this after the fact from another industry professional who had said, "God, I wish I knew you and about these options earlier," because the family decided to sell the home to pay for the care in the assisted living facility that she needed. But the capital gains that she paid was about $1 million in capital
Wow.
gains, which means that $1 million is going to the IRS. If she had taken a loan against the house to pay for, let's say, a few more years of care or however much she needed, instead of that $1 million going to the IRS, it would have gone to the family. And I guarantee you, the senior would much rather have it go to the family. No one's feeling bad for the IRS. So if you don't write them an unnecessary check, and they're certainly not going to return it out of the goodness of thehave heart, right? Once you sell that house, that's it. You're paying the bill. And so I think sometimes when we're talking to people about these things, it's a matter of reframing it. Like, and you've made a great point, is that you can use the house to be able to stay in the home, or your other alternative is to sell the home to move somewhere else. But if you want to stay in the home, the way to do that, unless you have, sufficient resources, let's just say, to cover it out of pocket, which some people don't need to finance, and certainly wouldn't recommend financing if they don't need it. But there are times like right now when the stock market is down, so liquidating an investment account to pay for things is not ideal. And so that's where we come in, is to provide those types of solutions and talk to people about, is a reverse mortgage the right option? Is it not the right option? I generally prefer alternatives whenever there's a possibility. But the idea is that I would guess most seniors, if they have a healthy family relationship, would much rather pass down that equity, whatever's left of it, to their children, grandchildren, charities, whatever things are important to them, rather than sending it to the IRS. And they get to live at home, so it's kind of like the best of all the worlds. But these are the challenges we talk about with seniors, is trying to figure out what's the right solution. How much do we think you'll need based on your age and condition and life expectancy, and building in enough to actually make the payments on the mortgage if it is a loan that has a payment attached to it. So there's lots of different things that we factor in. But the idea, if we look at it from the operator's perspective, because I know those are the people you're consulting more so than the families themselves, is it can potentially eliminate or reduce what I would imagine the biggest objection is I can't afford home care.
Right.
Can't pay the monthly bill.
And that's something that it's very interesting. There's an entire presentation that we put together where we work with our clients on having the conversations about money. And it's something that I can definitely say is a big challenge for most agency owners, the person closing the client, even some people answering the phone have a hard time giving the price quote on it, because they're coming from a healthcare background. They're coming from a perspective of providing the care, but our services are fee for service. They're not free. So if you're a private duty agency, it's your responsibility to be able to have that conversation and have the resources to recommend. You heard me talk a little while ago about why, back when I was doing this, I knew the reverse mortgage because there wasn't as many resources and options as they are today. So I had those conversations, but I sat down with the family and I would explain every aspect of it. And I knew, this is how a reverse mortgage company works. As a matter of fact, I even had two companies. I'm a big believer in, everybody talks about patient choice and options, but then they'll give out this list with 15 names on it. That's not directing people. I do the homework myself. I get two providers that I'm comfortable with, and I refer both and let the family go with who they choose. These are the two that we work with. Either one you'll be happy with. You have your pick, and then they interview both, and they go sometimes company A, sometimes company B, whatever. But I feel that it's our responsibility to have these resources, because when we sit down with a social worker, we sit down with a discharge planner or a director of nursing who's making those referrals, they're just as concerned about the affordability for the patient as the patient is. Are you good at what you do? And I always tell my clients, you talk to that social worker, that discharge planner, and say, don't get into the pricing. Don't get into how much is it going to cost and everything. Just if the person owns their home, if they have some resources, make the referral. It's my job to talk about finances. It's my job to help them find ways to afford the services. I have an entire arsenal of resources that they can choose from, and I can show it to them case by case, person by person. Just make the referral if they have the need. And so, in order to be able to confidently say that, you have to have resources like what you're talking about, Mark. Because if you don't have those resources and you don't know those resources, then you really don't know how to help your people properly in all facets of it. Yes, it's care, but there's also a financial aspect of it, a business side of it, and we have to cover all areas to properly provide care for this person. And then you take that burden away. Once it's set up, then they're not stressing out. The families aren't. They're confidently making the payments every month, whether they're writing a check or it's an ACH or however you're paying for it. And then we as the agency, we're not worried about how we're going to pay the bills and pay the caregiver doing the work. We can focus solely on providing that level of care and truly loving on our patients, not worried about where the resources are coming from, because that's been satisfied.
Right. And in many cases, there are a lot of house rich, cash poor. I put poor in quotations because that's a relative term, depends on what your expenses are. But there's a lot of people in that type of situation, especially seniors, because they're, again, not of the generation where maybe they took a lot of risks financially and, they've lived in the same home for a long time. It's just a totally different generation. You don't see those crazy entrepreneurs blowing up, like you do in the current generation. Times always change. But those are the people that need the help the most. And the other factor that we haven't talked about is also using the home as leverage. Yes, it may diminish the potential inheritance that your family might have later on. But like, if my parents asked me if I wanted them to suffer in their last years, or if maybe they would burn through half of the equity in their home and then I would get half of that, hopefully have healthy family relationships, but like, I would never want my parents to sacrifice care because they're trying to save a few dollars for me after they're gone. Like, that just would never even enter my mind.
100%.
So I think oftentimes people don't think about the impact on their families. So if you don't do that, what's the alternative? If you don't have the cash, you don't want to pull equity out of your home, the alternative is to sell it, pay the taxes, and go live in assisted living, or you have your family footing the bill for you. And I don't think any senior wants to be a burden on their family. And no, we put that in quotes as well, because families don't necessarily feel like it's a burden, but it's financial resources you're taking away from people who are in that sandwich generation, right? That's where I am too. I've got kids, I'm paying for all their stuff and school and everything. And that's really expensive. So to imagine trying to pay for care on top of that for my parents would be very difficult, But so sometimes it's a matter of saving your children from having to step in, your adult children from having to step in and foot the bill to help you. So the home can be a great resource for that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned it. Like, you and I are close in age, and we're at that generation age where most of us all of our grandparents have passed away, and many of us are starting to have parents that are passing away. And every single person I know who's lost a parent, they all say that money was not, the inheritance was not their concern. They were not concerned about it. As a matter of fact, it's usually the opposite. The person passing away is, I want to leave you something. I want to, like that. That's usually what we're hearing. It's not so much about the inheritance as much as a lot of people like people are cynical and they like to think, oh, well, yeah, I'm going to say less than 5% of the children are concerned about their inheritance. The vast majority are like, mom and dad, get them to care. Mom and dad, I can't afford to do it myself because, as you said, I have children, I have grandchildren. I'm still working. I'm having a hard. It's tight right now. It's tight for all of us. So I understand that. But then on the flip side of it, it's very few people. I want to definitely avoid that stigma, because it is a stigma and it is not the truth. Everybody I know who's losing a parent or has lost a parent would give anything for that parent to be back. And if they got an inheritance, they're like, okay, great, but I would trade this any day to be able to hug my mom again, or see my dad, go to the Giants game with my dad, like that. That's the stuff that really matters. And that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, because when you do have it, and this is the conversation that we're discussing, that's how we have to discuss it with the families. As we're speaking to agency owners who are looking for resources for their patients, this conversation that you and I are having right now, Mark, that's the conversation that these agencies need to have with the patients and their families. and they need to discuss it because it's very objective. That's the other thing I would say. This is not a subjective conversation. It's black and white. The services cost money. These are the resources that are at your disposal. These are the solutions to help you with it. Do you want to move forward? Now, there's a subjective nature of it. The subjective nature of it is mom needs help. Mom is not who she used to be. The day that I've probably thought about as an adult, as a child, is coming where my mom is not going to be here. She's got less time left than the other side, right? She's lived longer than she has. So, there's that anxiety of it. But once you get this financial aspect, if you decide to go the loan route, HLOC, whatever you decide to do, once you get that finances there, now it's set. Now we can shift the focus to let's provide the care. We can shift the focus to, and this is something I used to tell the clients I worked with, was very religious on this one. Mom's time is running out. So instead of coming over the house and, is this, is that, whatever, you got the care in place, you got the affordability in place, spend the quality time. Come over with mom, take her out to eat. Come over with mom, go to the beach or the boardwalk. If you go to the mountains. Do the stuff with mom that you've always said you were going to do with her that you didn't get the chance to do yet. Because if you don't, and she passes away, you'll never get to do it. That's the subject. That's the beauty of having this worked out. So as the agency owner, again, and I'll reiterate, it is our responsibility to have this conversation and set it up so that we can then say, now that this is set up, black and white, now go make the time, make the memories, so that when mom does pass away, she can live on through you, and you're a better person because of it. And everybody else is a better person because they see your mom in you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you hate for finances to get in the way of those things, and they don't have to. That's the thing. They don't have to. If you have resources and you have a home with equity, there's a way to sustain the quality of life by just using that investment to your advantage and paying for the care you need so you can focus on the things you should be focusing on, not how do you pay for care, or, are we getting the right care, or are we just going to rely on the government to provide it, which we know won't happen, and the level of care. I mean, I've heard all sorts of complaints about caregivers just not showing up when they're, government sponsored and they're overbooked, they're not paid very well. It's like, if you want quality care, you need to probably get it privately, not rely on the government for that if you have the option. And home financing is one way to be able to do that. Because we oftentimes talk to people and they're like, I can't afford it. I don't have enough Social Security. And the idea is, you cash out potentially a lump sum of money that's sitting in your account, hopefully invested wisely with a good financial advisor, so it's growing and offsetting the cost of the interest. But then slowly but surely, you're depleting it almost like you would deplete a retirement account. But the loan puts the money in your account to be able to do that. So that's the concept behind it. But Steve, I really appreciate your insight. I think we definitely see eye to eye on this issue and just in general on how to help people maintain that level of dignity and not be a quote unquote burden on their families. And there are solutions that I think could really put people at ease. And it's important for the home care community to understand these things because they're on the front lines. I'm sure they get told no fairly often, and probably for monetary reasons, and having this in their arsenal to say, hey, there may be an alternative. You own your home, maybe there's some equity in it. Just asking the right questions will help them understand if this is a potential option. Obviously, we'd love to help them. But this is more about highlighting you. So, Steve, if people want to find you, if they want to find one of your conferences, or if they want to talk to you about coaching through your company, what's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, best way people can find me is go to my website. It's homecareevolution.com. Homecareevolution.com. You can find out about our boot camp events that we have. We have one coming up over the summer in Newark, New Jersey, which is actually the New York City suburb area right at the airport. There's actually one of the New York City airports. So I would say come in, do the training Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then stay the weekend and go to Manhattan and see a play, Freedom Tower. The Statue of Liberty is literally 4 miles from the hotel where we're having it. So go see Lady Liberty, and it'll be a great time. But one last thing I also want to throw out there too, Mark, it's funny. being in healthcare, being in elder care since I was 24 years old, so it's 20 years now I've been doing this. And for the last 20 years, and it blows me away when I talk to people who are agency owners and I say, you do realize like you're setting yourself up for your own future someday, right? And like 90% of the people that I'm speaking to do not, right? And it's like, how could you? I've been in this, like when I was 20, I was 24. By 25, 26, I started retirement accounts, I started investments, I started all types of things, setting aside money that I don't have any money. Everyone's poor, right? I don't have any money. Setting aside money for that day because I don't want to be in the situation where I can't help myself or whatever. Because I look at home care as a really as like a future, a glance into the future. So it is my hope for every person listening here that if you don't have something set up, you set something up immediately after hearing this for your future, for yourself, but also recognize there are resources out there. And if you own your home, pay it off. Wow, I've been here for 18 years. It's almost paid off completely. I'm not going to move. I'll get another house and just continue, rent this one out someday or whatever. But, that's beside the point. Plan for the future. If you fail to plan, you're doomed to fail. So.
Yeah, well, and you feel it the most when you're in your senior years if you've depleted whatever limited resources you may have put aside. So we're big proponents of people having a proper financial team, not just on the mortgage side, but financial advisors, estate planning attorneys. Like all these things are so critical to set up so that you don't run into these bigger issues when you get older. And to have all those things in place. So big thank you for making that point. That's definitely something that we feel is really important. And especially if you're cashing out equity from your home, you don't want that to sit in a checking account getting 0.1% interest, right? You want to invest it wisely. I don't recommend seniors doing that on their own or even the families. They really need a professional advisor. So we're big proponents of like getting the full team of tax advisors and everyone involved. So you made a great point there. So Steve, to wrap this up, I always ask people this question. What's the one thing you wish operators, you just like rack your brain, God, I wish they knew blank, or I wish they did blank. What is that one thing that you just wish all of them knew how to do, what to do in sticky situations?
I really wish that from the operator standpoint, owner operators, they really understand the value of you are the expert in this scenario. What do I mean? I mean that there are too many folks out there that when someone calls in asking for a certain level of services, they just give them what they're asking for versus going out, assess the situation, and then sell the person the right level of care to address all the needs. You have to think about it from this perspective, Mark. The person calling asking for a certain level of care has never been through this before. They have no idea what to expect. That's like if a pipe busts in the wall of your house, you call the plumber and tell the plumber, I want you to come over and do X, Y, and Z to fix the pipe in the wall. You don't know what to do to fix that. The plumber does. That's why you're calling the plumber. So as you're the agency, you are the expert. When the patient calls you asking for care, you have to go out, assess the situation, and then give them a plan of care that will accomplish the goal of what? Keeping that person home and out of the hospital. That is the goal of home care. Too many people sell people what they ask for. It's not adequate. Person fails, goes to the hospital, and then they never come back, and they end up selling the house and move to an assisted living or something else because we tried home care and it didn't work out. So stop being order takers and go out, do the assessment, and sell what is needed to keep the person home and out of the hospital. That's what I wish more agencies knew how to do. Wow. And that's I spent all my days teaching people how to do.
And that's why we're here, right? Is to get that message out and tell people about these different options and how to phrase things in a certain way. But you're right. Don't just come to me and say, what's your cost, right? If you're an operator, I can afford X amount. Well, you got to find out, why are they saying that, right? Maybe they're not thinking of the fact that they own a valuable home or whatever it may be. So, well, listen, I can see why people turn to you for coaching and for advice, and the conferences look, I mean, we're hoping to come to the one that you mentioned in Newark, but the events are really energetic and fun. And obviously with you at the helm, that's no surprise, but the videos online look like, you're having the time of your life, and you're really passionate about what you do. And I always appreciate highlighting passionate people who are out there trying to help people, and you're helping operators, you're helping the seniors that they support. And I give you a big golf clap for doing what you do. So, Steve, thank you so much. I hope people will reach out to you and consult and attend the events, and hopefully we'll see you and them there. And thank you all for joining us today on this episode of On the Mark Financial Forum and Podcast. We will see you next time. Take care.